I am Elise Lovett. We are here this evening to share information on brain health and Cognizin Citicoline. Cognizin is a branded form of Citicoline. Citicoline is a potent brain health nutrient found naturally in our body. Cognizin is also made by a natural process and been studied in healthy subjects to support focus, attention, and mental energy. It's with my great pleasure to introduce you to our special guests, Max Lugavere and Nina Teichel. Ever since Max's mom was diagnosed with dementia, Max has made it his life goal to educate people about brain health from foods and supplements.
You know, the fear and helplessness and hopelessness and wondering whether or not my mom was going to die and how long it would take essentially just kind of closed in on me, and I had a panic attack for the first time in my life. And from that point forward, I basically became unable to think about anything but why this was happening to my mom and whether or not there was anything that I could do to help her and what I might be able to do to potentially prevent it from happening to myself. Today, we live in a time where 1 in 7 younger people complain of memory problems. 1 in 8 adults is on or has taken some kind of psychiatric drug. So our brains are not working the way that they ought to. To me, I think when you just look in the mirror and realize like what each one of us, the legacy that each one of us carries in between our ears, it's incredible. And yet our brains are under attack.
What are sort of the top 5 top foods that you've come to recommend?
So these are the 5 that you should not eat. Grain and seed oils, canola, corn, soybean oil, they're the worst.
Sorry, I just want to also, that means most food in restaurants people don't know is fried in those oils.
Yes, that's a very good point.
Yeah.
The added sugars, these are problematic, and we're consuming sugar by the boatload. And what that does is it keeps insulin chronically elevated. And chronically elevated insulin might be responsible for 40% of Alzheimer's cases alone.
When you say sugars, you mean candy? Do you also mean like complex carbs or fruit?
Cultivated modern grains and fruits. Grains are energy dense and nutrient poor. I work out religiously when I have the time, and so if I choose to have a brown rice bowl after a vigorous workout in the gym, where I'm using all of the stored sugar in my musculature, then that's going to be okay for me. But the truth is that half of the U.S. population is either diabetic or pre-diabetic, or on their way there to either of those states, and sedentary, and for those people, and for most of the people, I would say that grains are not something that you should have in your diet. And then when it comes to fruit, modern fruits are cultivated to contain more starch and sugar than ever before in human history.
An apricot was that big and not particularly sweet.
Exactly,
right.
Yeah, or like the wild banana
bread.
Compared to the modern banana. It's striking the contrast. So, I'm all about certain fruits like avocados and things like that. So the 5 foods to eat.
Yeah.
So I picked foods like eggs. Eggs are really high in a myriad of nutrients that benefit the brain. Definitely have to mention grass-fed beef. I'm a little controversial in that sense. I don't know why, honestly, but grass-fed beef cows are a modern invention, but they're the closest that we can get to the kinds of land animals that we would have consumed for the vast majority of our evolution. They contain a number of important nutrients and conditionally essential nutrients that make the brain work better. There was a really interesting study out of Deakin University's Food and Mood Center, led by Felice Jacka, who I interviewed her on my podcast. I have a podcast called The Genius Life. And she found that women who didn't eat 3 to 4 servings of red meat per week were twice as likely to be diagnosed with major depression or a mood disorder. And there was an interesting dose response where or dose effect rather, where people who consumed more than that were also at an increased risk. So I thought, I tell people some is better than none, but at the end of the day, it's all about a dietary pattern that also incorporates vegetables. I've been, hearing a lot about carnivore diets and things like that these days, but I'm a big fan of dark leafy greens. Any dark leafy green is going to be nutrient dense. So kale, spinach, arugula, these are my favorites. Rush University research, Martha Claire Morris, found that people who eat a large bowl of dark leafy greens every single day have brains that look up to 11 years younger on scans and on cognitive tests. It's not about one food or one meal, it's about the dietary pattern. and adhering to a dietary pattern that is going to give the brain the nutrients it needs to both create healthy new brain cells, which we now know that it can do up until death, and also to help those brain cells, give those brain cells a hand as they contend with the numerous insults thrown at it by the modern world.
Are there tips for doing it for people who are on a budget?
I think it's always better to pay the farmer versus pharma. I'm a big fan of buying in bulk. Bulk chain stores, carry many of these foods. I'm a fan of buying frozen. You could buy berries organically and frozen. They're flash frozen usually when they're picked at their peak of ripeness. They usually are even more nutritious when they're frozen. I'm also a big fan of ground grass-fed beef. It's a way more economical way of getting grass-fed beef.
Ground. Right, it's cheaper.
It's cheaper. Practice intermittent fasting, or my version of it.
Which is what?
Well, I basically don't eat for an hour or 2 or 3 after I wake up, and I don't eat for 2 to 3 hours before I go to sleep. When we wake up, our bodies have a certain inclination to burn fat and other stored fuels thanks to the hormone cortisol. And when we go to bed, the body winds down. Melatonin, ideally, wants to come up. And melatonin is a powerful hormone that's involved in gene regulation. It's an antioxidant. It also makes us less insulin sensitive. And that's one of the reasons why eating late at night is really a bad idea.
Do you take supplements as part of your routine?
It depends on what I'm eating at the time, but I'm a big believer in supplements like fish oil, vitamin D3 if I'm not spending time in the sun, vitamin K2, magnesium. Magnesium is pretty hard to get. And so I supplement with magnesium glycinate sometimes before bed. If I'm not getting adequate choline, if I haven't, or if I'm traveling and it's really hard for me, a supplement like Cognizin Citicoline can be very effective.